All right, lesson 6.2, equations of circles. For those of you preparing for the SATs, I think you would have at least talked about the general form of the equation of a circle. Okay, x minus h quantity squared plus y minus k quantity squared equals r squared. So our center is at the point HK. Our radius, we know our radius is the segment from the center to any point on the circle. And furthermore, every radii is equivalent. All right, so no matter where, as long as it's from the center to a point on the circle, the radii would be equivalent. And we know that if a point goes from a point on the circle through the center to another point on the circle, then we know the diameter is twice the radius. Okay, determine the center and the radius. So the center, okay, h opposite of the value in the parentheses. So h would be positive 3, k would be negative 2, and your radius is the square root of r squared. Okay, so the radius of that circle would be 5. For number 2, center, nothing is being added or subtracted from the x. So h would be equal to 0, k would be equal to positive 1. Radius would be square root of 2. And then lastly, center for number 3 would be negative 2, positive 1. And the radius would be the square root of 19. So just being able to pick out those defining pieces. All right, so to write equations of circles, you may have to complete the square. And I know that this was not your favorite in chapter 1. But when we complete the square, okay, ax squared plus bx, we're finding that value of c. We want the lead coefficient. We want a to be equal to 1. And to complete the square, we take half of b and square it. Okay, so for this one, x squared plus 18x plus half of 18 is 9. When I square 9, 81 would be the value to complete the square. Then on the second one, y squared minus 7y plus what? Okay, and I know you despise fractions. Half of 7 squared. So I would need to add into my equation 49/4 to complete the square. Now the whole point of completing the square is that so we can write the equation as some quantity being squared. Okay, so when we complete the square and we factor, square root of x squared is x. The sign of the middle term is going to be the sign of the factor of the binomial. And then the square root of 81 is equal to 9. Okay, so I'd like to try and get you to think that every piece of the expression gives you a piece of information about the factor. So y squared minus 7y plus 49. Square root of y squared is y. My middle term is minus, so my binomial needs to be subtraction. And then when I look here, square root of 49/4 would give me 7/2. And then that quantity would be squared. Now, I look at it that way, or this here, whatever we use to factor, is always going to be equal to b over 2. So b over 2 was positive 9, so my factor was a plus 9. From the second one, b over 2 was negative 7/2, so to complete the square, that's exactly what I would use in my factored form. So either way that you look at it, we complete the square so that we can then write the expression in factored form. All right, determine the center and radius. So looking at this, first we have to collect the x's together. So x squared minus 8x, and then we're going to complete the square on that. Plus y squared plus 4y, then we'll complete the square on the y terms, and I'm going to add that 10 to the other side of the equal sign. Okay, so half of b squared, negative 4 squared gives me positive 16. Half of 4 is 2, 2 squared is 4. But remember, to maintain balance, whatever you add on the left-hand side, you have to add on the right-hand side. So we have to add a 16, we have to add 20 to the right-hand side of the equation so that we can maintain balance. Okay, so now factoring it, because I need it in factored form to find the center and the radius. So completing the square with the x's will give me a factored form of x minus 4 quantity squared. Completing the square for the y's will give me the factored form y plus 2 quantity squared. Adding the values on the right-hand side, that would give me 30. Okay, so let's just go backwards real quickly. Back again, rather. Negative 8 divided by 2 is negative 4. That's what I use to write the factored form. 4 divided by 2 is positive 2. Plus 2 is what I use there in order to write it in factored form. All right, so now we have to answer the question. So the center of the example in number 4 would be positive 4, negative 2. The radius would be the square root of 30. Okay, 30 does not have any perfect square factors, so we would just leave it as such. All right, number 5. Collect the x terms, x squared minus 10x, and then I'm going to complete the square. Y squared, there's no other y term, so that's finished. And then I'm going to subtract 5 from both sides of the equation. All right, so I take half of b and square it. Negative 5 squared is 25. I have to add 25 to the right-hand side to keep balance. Now I'm going to factor it. So x minus 5 quantity squared plus y squared equals 20. So that's the equation. Now from here, my center would be positive 5, 0. And my radius would be the square root of 20. 20 does have a perfect square factor, so I can simplify that to be 2 root 5. All right, points of intersection. So we've been looking at determining, or we've been finding points of intersection since chapter 1. We started with lines. Now we're looking at lines and circles. Next, we'll look at lines and ellipses. So this one's set up pretty nicely for us. We already have that y is equal to 2x, equals or equals. So wherever I see a y, I'm going to replace it with 2x. X squared plus y squared equals 20. X squared plus 4x squared equals 20. Combining like terms, dividing by 5 on both sides. Now, since we're finding points of intersection, and I should have started here. If I am sketching the circle, center's at the origin, radius is square root of 20, so that's going to be somewhere between 4 and 5. Okay, so draw my circle. Now, if I have a line of 2x, y-intercept is 0, slope of 2. So when I look at this, I better get 2 points of intersection when I go to solve the system. Okay, so please remember, when you take the square root, 2 answers exist, a positive and a negative 2. So the point in the first quadrant would be where x is positive 2. The point in the third quadrant would be where x is negative 2. Now how do we find the corresponding y values? Plug it into either of the equations. Plugging into the linear function would be easier. So when x is 2, y is 4. And then when x is negative 2, y is negative 4. So it verifies the simple sketch that we put on there as well. Okay, that's what we'll finish up with. There's a second video with more examples of ways in which you can write equations and solve.